In chapter 5, we begin to see the dehumanization of the Jews, and many are sent to Auschwitz. Most of the chapter is intense. It's about hiding from the Nazis in the ghetto. I'm going to spend this chapter not focusing on life in the ghetto, but rather on what they were afraid of and what was waiting to meet them. They were sent from Strodula, the ghetto, to Auschwitz eventually. And it's here that book 2 mostly takes place. Here you see Auschwitz 1. And Auschwitz actually had 3 camps. Auschwitz 1, 2, and 3. This is Auschwitz 1, the smallest. And it was the original camp. You can see it from the air. There's a lot of different barracks. You'll see what those look like on the ground. And then over here is Auschwitz 2, Birkenau, also it was called. And it is much larger. In fact, it's immense. You'll see in the videos that I show you. But today I want to focus on Auschwitz 1 and what it looked like and the kinds of things that were happening there. I'm here at the famous gate of Auschwitz. This is where Wladek and Anya would have arrived. You can see behind me the sign that says Arbeit macht frei, work makes you free. And this was the lie that was presented to Jews who were exterminated in these camps. Arbeit macht frei. Work makes you free. And this is what all prisoners saw. And it seems to be some sort of cruel joke. If you work hard enough, you can become free. The reality is that 91% of the Jews that ever went to Auschwitz were killed, murdered, and 85% of all people that were prisoners at Auschwitz were murdered. So work did not set anyone free. I arrived early in the morning to Auschwitz. It was a beautiful summer day, and I started to walk around Auschwitz 1. Auschwitz is huge. It's made up of 3 separate camps. And at its peak in the summer of 1944, it held 135,000 prisoners. That was 25% of all German prisoners at that time. And they think that the Nazis deported about 1.3 million people to Auschwitz, the 3 different complexes. And that was in 5 years, 4.5 years, between 1940 and 1945. Of those, they murdered approximately 1.1 million, or nearly 90%. This is Auschwitz 1. You can see behind me the guard towers. And then if you walk this way, there's another guard tower behind me. And inside the camp, behind me now, would have been where the prisoners lived. And then behind these double barbed wire fences, which have stood the test of time, they're probably the strongest thing in here, are other buildings, presumably for officers and workers, German workers, who could live outside the gates and be free. Here's another view of the barbed wire fences. This is 2 fences thick, the guard tower, and then you have this grassy area with another huge concrete wall with barbed wire at the top behind it. In case you were thinking about escaping. If you look closely at these barbed wire fences, you can see that there's no way you could ever get through these without mangling yourself completely. First of all, there's 2 of them. So if you got through one, you'd be in the middle with a guard tower looking at you. You can see the guard towers, the end. And if you were to get into the center zone where the rocks are, you'd have to get through another barbed wire fence, which would be nearly impossible. As I walk through Auschwitz right now, the thing that occurs to me is that it's been really preserved well, so it looks pretty. It's like a park almost. But what happened here was anything but pretty. Vladek and Anya would have come here knowing that they left their son behind, thinking he might have lived, hoping he would have lived, but believing that they would die. Because most Jews at that time knew what was going on. There were rumors about this camp being a place to exterminate people. The barracks at Auschwitz I are old army barracks. They're sturdy, they're made of bricks, and on the inside you can see that the accommodations were not that nice. There's different levels of accommodations, and each of these barracks is different. Some of them have bunks where people could sleep. Some of them had makeshift bathrooms. Some of them had blankets or towels like you see here on the floor to sleep. There were all different levels of accommodation. But for sure, all of the accommodations were poor, and people were crammed into these buildings until eventually they were taken and exterminated. All of the buildings have been turned into museums of some sort. There's some that are recreations of what it looked like. Some have piles of glasses from people who died at Auschwitz, piles of hair, piles of shoes, and some of them have been turned into fancy museums. Different countries have remodeled these barracks to represent the Holocaust from their perspective. So France has one, Russia has one, the United States has one, and they just have done these artistic exhibitions to try and show the Holocaust from their country's perspective. The basements in these buildings were creepy. Cells with writing on the wall, and you could see how suffering was prevalent here. So at this wall behind me, the Nazis would shoot and assassinate hundreds of people. Inside the courtyard, thousands of people were killed and tortured. Behind me you can see a couple of poles with actually railroad ties bolted to the top of them. These were used to hang prisoners. This building you see here was once used as a munitions bunker, and then it was turned into a crematorium in 1940 by the Nazis, and thousands of Jews were burned here upon arrival at Auschwitz. You can see the big chimney stack on top. Władek was one of the few to survive this place. He was in the roughly 10% of people that made it out. Perhaps we can see some of his personality traits that helped him survive. But what if something like this was happening in your world? What if you were being taken from your home, from your family, and everything you knew and loved? Your only crime is being born the race that you are. And what if it wasn't you, but someone else? We seem to think that if we don't get involved in other people's problems, we can save ourselves. Seeing Auschwitz begs this question. What are we here for?